everybody. Welcome to Commander at Arms. This is a podcast between myself, Paul, and my friend James.
How's it going?
You may know us from the Great Library podcast, where we play D&D with a few of our other friends. Me and James decided, because we love Magic so much and are so passionate about it, that we would make our own little spin-off and talk exclusively about Magic, specifically about Commander.
EDH, for everyone out there who is old enough to remember EDH. So a lot of the conversations we used to have around the table at D&D would always come back to Magic and our Friday night games. So instead of doing a half D&D, half Magic the Gathering kind of talk show, we decided to just break off and make our own. And as Paul said, we are Commander at Arms. We're going to talk about everything Commander, everything you want to know about Commander, everything coming up in new sets that might need a little bit more explanation that happens in Commander, much like the topics we will be covering today. So I just want to know, so how long have you been playing Magic and specifically Commander for, Paul?
So I've been playing Magic for about 8 years now. It'll be 9 in a little while. About 6 of those I've been playing Commander. So I started at the tail end of Innistrad block, and back then I was playing exclusively limited. I did nothing but draft, sealed, like pre-releases, etc. When RTR returned to Ravnica, for anybody newer to the game out there, and Theros rotated into Standard, I moved into Standard, and back then I played a Bant Tokens homebrew. After that, I made some good friends within the community, and they all played Commander, so logically speaking, it made sense to me for just to play Commander. Luckily, it didn't stop there. It's been a great way for me to make friends in Florida. Since I am originally from New York, it was nice to already have an easy way to meet people.
Yeah,
so
definitely. And I get that, especially coming from, another country as well.
Right. So Magic is just something I'm very passionate about in general. I like the rules interactions. I like all the different types of people that play, all the different types of decks that people bring. It's just a very interesting and fun game. And I can't imagine anything else that I have more fun with. So having... there's obviously a lot of people talking about Magic out there. But I think, at least from my perspective, having dabbled in both competitive and casual aspects of it, I think I have kind of a unique blended perspective, whereas most people probably just see it mostly as casual and mostly as competitive. It's quite easy for me to see it from both angles.
Yeah.
How about you, James?
So I've been playing Magic since 1997 with Tempest Block. That was my very first introduction to the game. I was still quite young. I don't remember ever making anything decently good, but it wasn't until about 2016 when I actually picked the game back up and got pushed into playing Standard, mostly back when Battle of Zendikar came out, which was just a terrible set to start in Standard. I wish I had started earlier and got a lot of the Khans packs and got all those fetch lands. That'd have been great. But I didn't start playing Commander until 2018 when I bought the actually went splitsies with my one of my mates back home with the Commander Anthology, and I started a mono red Duretti deck, and that was a lot of fun. But it hasn't really been until I met you guys, like you, Paul, and all the rest of our play group, that it's really kind of pushed this love for EDH, Commander, wanting to brew new decks and everything. I came to the group with one really bad Sultai Muldrotha deck, and it was terrible. And now that I've got another 6 or 7 decks with 2 more on the way, so I mean it's definitely excelled my passion for the game, and still learning a lot of the rules interactions and everything. So I guess we'll just get into this week's topic, and this week we're going to be talking about Ikoria. So I know Ikoria has been not really out yet because of the COVID-19 pandemic that's still happening. It's going to be coming out on the 15th of May instead of the 24th of April like it was set to. But a lot of the cards are still out, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff that you'll expect out of Ikoria, or what you might have seen about Ikoria. So if you want to elaborate on that one, Paul.
Yeah. So, by the way, just to preface this, I am not a judge. I just simply understand how a lot of things interact. So first thing I want to talk about is keywords, both new and returning. And this has probably been beaten into your head over and over again by now, but just in case this is your first experience with them, there are 3 keywords, as far as I know, in Ikoria. I will discuss the returning one first. It is cycling. Cycling is a mechanic that we have seen previously. It was originally a very old mechanic, and it returned... I forgot what set exactly it returned in.
Amonkhet.
Amonkhet, there we go.
Yeah, it came back with the Amonkhet lands, had a lot of cycling, and you had a lot of... there was a white card that has it on it as well, and I even own the card. Yeah, that's it. Forsake the Worldly. It's a exile target artifact or enchantment with 2 cycling.
Right. So, we have seen cycling before, even actually pretty recently, and we are seeing it again here. Cycling is an activated ability of a card in your hand where you pay the mana cost listed next to the cycling ability, you discard that card, and draw a card. Just to detail some of the interactions for that for you, or how it works, you first pay the mana cost and discard the card. That is part of the cost. That ability goes on the stack. Once the ability resolves, you draw a card. It does not all take place at the same time. You must wait for the ability to resolve, then you may draw your card. Your opponent may respond to the ability on the stack before you draw your card.
Yeah, but it can't be countered with regular counters. It has to be countered with an ability counter, like
right. So since cycling isn't
disallow
ability, an old card, not an old, well, older card from Kaladesh, disallow would do it. Stifle, an even older card, would do it. More recently in Theros, we got a card called Whirlwind Denial, which would also work for that. Whirlwind Denial is 2 in a blue, counter each spell and ability your opponents control unless they pay 3 or 4, something like that.
I believe it's 4.
Yeah, I think it's 4.
It's one of the newest... okay, I'm not going to say one of the best counterspells, because we will talk about one of the newest best counterspells that have just been printed. But, I mean, it goes up there with Flusterstorm.
Right, and worth noting that it is an uncommon, so it's relatively cheap also.
Oh, yeah.
But that aside, now that we've talked about cycling, we're going to talk about 2 new mechanics. So I'm going to leave Mutate for last, because that one can be a little hairy.
Yeah, that one's going to need a lot of it. Not really much a lot of explanation, but I think we're going to be talking about it for a little bit. So the next one we've got is the keyword counters, yes?
Right. Yes. So we're all familiar with +1/+1 counters, -1/-1 counters. Are there any other kinds of counters that people would know? I don't really know. Anyway, that's good enough.
Not really. No, I think the most common counters would be +1/+1 counters and -1/-1 counters. Right. Unless other cards say put a coin counter on it, like we just got with the new Athreos in Theros Beyond Death, which I mean there are other counters, like book counters, page counters.
Right.
But I think just the mass general of people who play Magic the Gathering are used to familiar of the +1/+1 and the -1/-1s.
And for us,
but now we have a brand new way to add counters to things.
For us Commander players, we also have experience counters. But yes, now we have keyword counters. Now, counters retains the same property as it always does. It is something that represents a permanent effect on that card. So +1/+1 counters represents buffs to power and toughness. -1/-1 counters represents debuffs to power and toughness. They don't always represent buffs to power and toughness. Like we just said, Athreos gives coin counters, which just gives the card a counter that it has until it's otherwise removed, and certain effects happen based on the presence of those counters or not.
Like Athreos' coin counter lets you bring a card back from the graveyard at the beginning of your end step.
Correct, right. Keyword
So-
counters function similarly in that they represent a permanent buff, so to speak, but they actually give keywords that we're all familiar with by now. So keywords include trample, vigilance, lifelink, death touch. I don't know if I already said flying. I don't think I did.
Flying. No, you didn't say flying.
So keywords are, as it sounds like, they're just one word that's printed on the card, and they represent certain effects. So trample, any damage that would be dealt beyond lethal to a creature or creatures is dealt to the player, the defending player. Flying can only be blocked by flying creatures or creatures with reach, etc. And these keyword counters actually grant these keywords to these creatures as long as they have that counter on them. This is something entirely new that we have never seen before. We have seen effects that grant trample or flying temporarily.
Like you've got the enchantment levitate, which is 2 blue, and it gives all your creatures you control flying.
Right.
But it doesn't actually give the card flying per se. So if you get rid of levitate, then all of your creatures lose flying. Whereas with these counters, you have to find a way to get rid of the counter first. So not all of your creatures will have flying, death touch, lifelink or so. Right. Until you find out a way to get rid of that counter. Or if you remove the card from play and bring it back, it will lose those counters.
Right. So we've never really seen a non-permanent based way to grant keywords. Usually it comes in the form of enchantment, like Rancor, or like James just said, levitate.
I only said levitate because it was the first one on top of my head that I remember, and it's in my lands matter deck. It's in my my Noyan Dar deck to give all of my lands flying.
But the point
which I might have to look at now.
But the point is, up until now, anything that granted keywords was a permanent. Anything that granted keyword permanently was a permanent itself, with a very, very exclusive exception to a card, very old card from Portal 3 Kingdoms called Ride the Delu Horse, which I'm not going to explain right now. It's a very old card. But this is the first time that we are seeing a non-permanent based way to grant keywords semi-permanently. With that out of the way, now we can finally talk about Mutate. This is the one that I have been dreading talking about since we started discussing this.
I think Mutate's going to be a game changer when it comes to commanders. They just have so much value on them and the ability to give extra value. So Mutate itself is there's a cost to pay for it. So just in this instance, we'll go Amitri, the Ever Playful, who is 3 black, green, blue for a 6/6 legendary creature Nightmare Beast. It has trample, and it has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, return target creature card with Mutate from your graveyard to your hand. Now it's also got Mutate, and it's got a Mutate cost of 1 black, green, blue. So basically, if you mutate this card, you are able to put it on top or under a non-human creature you own, and then every time it mutates, it then gets its mutate triggers, which is whenever this creature deals... so this one says whenever this creature deals combat damage, but there are other ones where it says when this creature mutates, do X.
Right. So, mutate is one of the more complicated mechanics we've seen in a long time, and I think the last time we saw something even similar to this was in the original Thero set. In the original Thero set, we had a mechanic called Bestow, which was you paid the alternate cost, similar to Mutate, and you cast it as an enchantment aura, and you would target a creature to enchant. Mutate is slightly different in that the creature that you cast is still cast as a creature spell. So if you pay the mutate cost and you target a creature on the battlefield and it becomes a non-legal target, it still the mutated card on the stack still gets cast as a creature. Right. So in that way, it's slightly different. The key difference between the way they interact with other creatures is that if a creature is bestowed and that creature is killed somehow, the bestow creature falls off and becomes its own entity. Whereas with mutate, if that creature dies, the whole stack of mutated creatures is killed. Because remember that with mutate, it actually specifies in the reminder text. And the whole thing is just the creature on top with the mutations underneath.
Yes. And the new mutate card can go on top or underneath the original mutated card, as long as it's, So we'll go with Mind Leecher for now. It's a 4 black for a 5/5 creature nightmare. It has flying, and whenever this creature mutates, exile the top card of each opponent's library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. Now it has a mutate cost of 4 and a black. So what this means is that every time you mutate something on top or underneath Mind Leecher, you get to do that effect, which I think is just going to be a ridiculous amount of triggers. I mean, you talk about a Taser death trigger deck having so many triggers, the new mutate mechanic's going to make us just have to worry about board states even more now.
I think the biggest thing with mutate is a lot of people, like myself, at first, are going to be confused that it is just the creature on top and it's not combining power and toughness. So if your original creature that you mutated was a 6/6 and that's the one that you choose to put on top, your final creature...
It stays a 6/6.
With the text of the creature below it in addition to its original text.
Yeah, it's not... Don't think of mutate as an equipment card. It's literally just adding more text to the text box. And anytime it says, this creature... Because when you mutate a card underneath another creature... The original creature's stats and everything stay, but the name stays as well. So if the creature underneath says, let's just use, I'm trying to find one here exactly. Sawtusk Demolisher, right? If you put another creature underneath that, it's still going to stay as Sawtusk Demolisher. If the creature underneath says, when and has its name, it just becomes target. It just becomes when this creature. So that's another thing that people are getting confused with at the moment, is when it says, and it specifically says the card's name in the text, what becomes of that card. So it just becomes when this creature does X, you get that effect. So when this creature mutates, you get that effect. Sorry.
Right, and worth noting that those mutate abilities that say when this creature mutates, those are triggered abilities, again, that use the stack. So the same way you can respond to cycling, you can respond to these mutate abilities.
Which is where Whirlwind Denial becomes even better. Someone's got a massive, a huge mutated creature, and they want to mutate it one more time and get 13 triggers on the stack. Whirlwind Denial that. It won't counter their creature, but it will counter all of those triggers.
All right. I think that should just about do it, unless you can think of anything that I'm missing here.
No, not with mutate. No, I think we're good with mutate at the moment.
Okay. So,
if anyone else is still confused, I'm sure they can swing us a message and we can explain it, or we can go back and rehash on mutate if we need to.
All right. So I want to talk.
There was one more.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say there's one more rule that we missed, and one more new keyword that we did miss, and we did that deliberately, because it's going to add huge value to the way we build decks and the way we think about decks when we build for Commander. That new rule is Companion.
Yes. So for anybody unfamiliar with Companion, there are 10 of them in Ikoria. There's one for each guild color combination. So, each 2-color pair, red, blue, black, white, etc. Companion is a mechanic where the card has a condition listed on it. It's usually a deck building condition. Actually, I think all of them are, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they all are. So they all have a restriction to your starting deck, and as a reward for that restriction, you get to play this card essentially as an extra card. It doesn't count against your deck size or anything.
No.
You get to cast it from outside the game once per game.
And that's the big thing that Companion has really thrown a wrench in with Commander, because we are a 100 card format. 99 in the stack, or 99 in the deck, and 1 off to the side, which is your commander. These new companion cards are not in anywhere. They're outside of the game. They're not even in a sideboard. They're nothing. They're in their own companion zone. And I think that's probably the biggest thing about them is they're just going to give so much extra value to people's decks. I mean, there's cards that we'll go through and we'll list them all and we'll list like what's good about them and how to use them. But I think just giving us the ability to play an extra card, so you draw your original 7, that technically gives you 8 because you have access to your commander. Now on your first turn you have 9 cards in hand because you have that extra companion card. So I think what Companion's going to do for the format, especially the Rule 0 that everyone should be familiar with, you sit down at the table, you talk to your play group, you talk to your pod, about what you're going to be doing. I'm playing this card and its power level is that. Just having that conversation, it's gonna have. I think it's going to add to Rule 0 saying, what's your power level, who's your commander, what turn do you expect to kind of combo off, or are you playing a battle cruiser deck, how do you play Magic? Do you rely heavily on tutors? Do you not rely heavily on tutors? All the regular questions we ask people when we talk about Magic. But I think what we're going to be adding now is Companion. Do you run a companion card? Do you not run a companion card? Because I think if you're the only one in a pod playing with a companion card off to the side, I feel like you're going to be getting not a huge advantage to adding to your win rate, but you're definitely going to be getting an added bonus over. It's more of a competitive edge over the people who aren't playing with a companion.
Right. So I think the most powerful thing about these companions. And actually, I'm going to preface it a little bit by saying, in Commander, in particular, in pretty much every format, one of the most powerful things you can do is cast a tutor. For anybody who is newer to the game, a tutor is a card that allows you to search your library for a particular card. Sometimes it can be any card, sometimes it'll have a certain quality, and you can add that card to your hand or put it on top of your deck.
Yeah. So like Mystical Tutor, Diabolic Tutor.
That you can do in Magic in general, and particularly in Commander, because we're a singleton format, so that reduces the variance incredibly. And Companion falls along the same lines, except you're just skipping the middleman of casting the tutor, And these Companions are cards that obviously you have already built around because they all have these restrictions. So it's going to be a powerful effect consistently every time you play the game with little to no drawback. I think is the most powerful thing. And it's an extra card that you just have access to all the time. And
correct.
A lot of people I've been noticing are overlooking the fact that it is a 100% guaranteed extra card with a highly relevant effect for your deck.
And those effects we'll probably we'll get into right now. So, like we said, there's 10 brand new companion cards, and we're going to list them off. Actually, we're going to do 8. Because two of them are not playable in our format. One, because one of them is banned, and the other one requires you to have over your starting deck amount, and we aren't able to change our deck size.
Right.
So it's asking you to play more than at least 20 cards. So the 2 banned cards, or the 2 cards that we can't play in the format, as a companion, one of them, which you would have heard about because it's famously been everywhere, is Luchary, the Spell Chaser. It is a 1 hybrid is it, which is just either a blue or a red, so 2 of those, for a 3/2 elemental creature. Sorry, a 3/2 legendary creature elemental otter. It says, Companion, each non-land card in your starting deck has a different name. Now, for us in a singleton format, that's literally every single deck that has, is it colors.
Right, which means...
So, it's literally played in every single is it deck. So, if you're playing a 5-color deck, if you're playing is it colors, if you're playing, I can't think of the shard names at the moment off the top of my head.
Jund. Oh, it's not red, blue.
Not Jund.
Grixis.
Yes, that's one. I couldn't think of it. Not off the top of my head. So it says it has flash, And so Luchary, the spell tracer, has flash, and when Luchary, the spell tracer, enters the battlefield, if you cast it, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control, you may choose new targets for the copy. Now, I don't have to tell you how powerful copying a spell is in Magic, especially in Commander. Especially also in those colors, too.
Yeah, even casting Luchary on something as simple as a 1-mana blue cantrip is still extremely powerful. So this card was preemptively banned due to its high power level, non-existent drawback. It would literally just be the 101st card in any deck that plays red and blue.
Correct. I mean, we don't really want to talk about auto includes when it comes to Commander, especially, I mean, like, when we play Commander, because we're not an absolutely competitive or anywhere up there when we play it in our play groups. Yeah, we play strong decks, but we don't play like turn 2, turn 3 combos. And I think anyone having access to this card would just be, you know, it's a dual caster mage essentially that doesn't need to be fished out of your deck.
So it's slightly different from dual caster, and that dual caster can copy any instant or sorcery, and Luchary specifies ones that you control. But it is worth noting that. So just to say, I do have what I would consider a competitive deck. I have Marisol the Pretender, and I would 100% play Luchary in that deck, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with the theme of the deck, it has nothing to do with anything. It's just a huge value engine.
But getting that extra copy of any spell is huge.
Exactly, and like obviously in that deck I play things like Dig Through Time, Serum Visions, Preordain, Ponder. All of these cards are cheap, and getting 2 copies of them would just be absolutely insane. I play Intuition in that deck. I would love to Luchary in Intuition and search my deck for 6 cards. That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be phenomenal.
And Intuition's an instant, and Luchary has flash. So I could even do it on someone's end step. Alright, so I don't want to talk too much more about Luchary because he is banned. So
he is banned, yeah. We don't want to get everyone's hopes up.
I don't think he'll ever see the light of day, ever.
I mean, the banned list for us is I mean, it is just a guideline. I mean, if you want to talk to your playgroup and be like, hey, can we allow Luchary for just say 2 months worth of play testing or trying it out? I mean, we never really got that from the rules committee. So, I mean, if you want to give it a go and try it, then by all means, talk to your friends, talk to your playgroup, see if you can just throw Luchary in a deck somewhere and see how much fun it could be.
Right, and I guarantee you'll come up with the same result as everybody else. But it might be worth trying. The other one that it's not banned, but we cannot play it as for its companion cost in our format is Yorion the Sky Nomad, which is 3 Azorius Hybrid, which means you can pay those mana costs with either blue or white mana. Its companion restriction is that your starting deck has at least 20 cards more than the minimum deck size. As we all know in Commander, we can only have 100 cards in our deck. 99 of them are our actual deck, and one of them is our commander, which equals 100 cards total.
At the moment.
So we can't actually fulfill that companion condition. Now, I do want to pay special attention. to Yorion itself without the companion cost. It is a legendary creature. It is a flying 4/5, and it says when it enters the battlefield, exile any number of other non-land permanents you both own and control. Return those cards to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So, real quick, I just want to briefly say that this could actually be a contender with Brago for blue-white blink decks. Brago needs to deal combat damage in order to have his ability proc, whereas Yorion just does it on ETB. So, just wanted to give that an honorable mention. Even though we can't play it as companion, it would still be very good in the 99 of any blinky deck, or even it contends with Brago as a commander for the blue-white blink deck. Alright, so we are going to move on to the actual
So one of the next one of the next companions we can play is Umori the Collector. Now, Umori the Collector is a 2 for hybrid Golgari for a 4/5 legendary creature ooze. With Companion, each non-land card in your starting deck shares a card type. If this card is your chosen companion, you may cast it once from outside of the game. Now, we didn't mention before, but companions, once they're into the game, they act like every other creature in the game. So if it goes to the graveyard, it goes to the graveyard. If it gets shuffled back into your deck, it goes back to your deck. If it goes to your hand, it goes to your hand. There's no way to get it back into that companion zone or back it to outside of the game once it has entered the game. As Umori the Collector enters the battlefield, choose a card type. Spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast.
So, as we all know, cheating mana in Magic is always a very powerful, very good effect. Having a consistent way to do that, such as this Companion, is even more powerful. Its restriction is that your starting deck has... Each non-land card in your starting deck has to share a card type, which means that all of them have to have the creature type, or all of them have to have the enchantment type, all of them have to have the artifact type, etc. So I could very easily see this being an artifact-centric deck, where you're just playing green-black artifacts, very similar to like Glissa the Trader. There you go. I just made the deck. It's Glissa the Trader with this as the companion. Artifact. There you go.
Done. Look at that.
Oh, actually,
that's probably my
you can't do that because Glissa is not an artifact, and she is part of the deck. So that would not work.
So you would have to play a Golgari artifact legendary creature.
Or you could play Muldrotha all creatures. Play your Umori and discount all your creatures. Note that these discounts apply to things that you cast, which means even if you cast them from the graveyard with Muldrotha, you are still getting that discount. So that is another decent way to build around. And
we just did get that snake that reduces the cost of things you cast from the graveyard by 2. So I mean, there's a 3 trade off.
Yep. And so this is also just very efficiently costed 4 mana, 4/5. It'll hold the ground for a long time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think this is just a very powerful effect. It's mana cheating in Golgari, something that we don't see too often. And again, like most of these companions, like why not play it? Honestly.
And I mean, if you're playing, it's not typically the way you play a Muldrotha deck, because you play Muldrotha to get absolute value, but you could throw in a Yarok the Desecrated in that deck as well, and just get insane. I mean, you could even play just Yarok the Desecrated as your commander as well.
Also true.
Because he wants to double the effects of permanents coming in. And I mean, if you're just playing creatures with a lot of ETB effects and then getting Muldrotha out to then be able to play them from the graveyard, I mean, that's just insane value right there. You just won't get the ramp from the artifacts or anything that you want. So you'd have to get ramp through all of your creatures. But I mean, green and ramp creatures is ridiculous. I mean, if you just want to play, all of your little dirtily elves to get mana that way, or you can play like wood elves, there's Sakura Tribe Elder. I mean, there's many ways of getting creatures who ETB and get you a land card out of your deck.
Right, and just a couple things that I want to mention real quick. I actually forgot the first one that I wanted to say. That's oh, yes. So, Umori's ability is not an enter the battlefield ability. It isn't as it enters the battlefield. So, if you were thinking of Panharmoniconing your Umori, don't do it. It's not going to work. And I only wanted to mention that because you had mentioned Yarok, and I didn't want people to get the wrong idea that you can choose a card type twice with Umori when you have Yarok out.
I mean,
the double discount.
Well, I mean, you could, but the first one would then get erased by the second one. So it's always the last one that you choose would be the one that you would choose. That you would get, sorry.
Well, you just wouldn't get double triggers here. It's as it enters the battlefield. It's not when it enters the battlefield.
Oh, okay.
So
yep, I see that wording.
It works the same way as clones. So clones, your opponent doesn't know what you're going to copy before it enters the battlefield. You don't have to say what it's going to copy. On the subject of clones, though, you'll note that Umori is a creature. So things like clone, I forgot the 2-mana one, Phantasmal Image, things like that can copy this and gives you extra discounts. Note that if you do go the all-creature route, your Phantasmal Image will cost 1 blue mana when you cast it. And again, you know that you're going to have Umori because it has Companion. So you can actually make that happen.
Did we just build like an Umori deck like on the spot?
Probably. I mean, these build themselves.
I mean, literally. I have a Maldorotha and a Yarok ready to go. So I mean, like, we could totally build this deck.
So Umori, I think, is one of the better companions, and I do want to say that we are talking from the perspective of Commander. We're not talking about other constructed formats like Standard, Modern, Legacy, Vintage. We're talking exclusively in terms of Commander. And that being said, I think Umori is probably one of the better ones for our format. Very easy companion restriction and very powerful effect.
Correct. Especially reducing the cost of the creatures. And then having, you know, like, your Wood Elves is what? 2 and a blue? Oh, sorry, 2 and a green?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's basically a better Rampant Growth right there.
And, honestly, you could even throw in Triskelion combo. With, you know, you have Scavenging Ooze, Triskelion, and Mikaeus the Unhallowed. You have Mikaeus and Triskelion in your graveyard, Scavenging Ooze on the field. And
so, are you saying
an entirely creature-based combo right there for you?
Are you saying a 2-card infinite combo with Umori?
Well, Umori just helps you speed up the process of getting there.
Yeah.
But it's a 3-card, entirely creature-based combo. You can fetch all 3 pieces with Buried Alive, and if you have any reanimation in your deck, you can just get the Scavenging Ooze back.
Which, I mean, if you play Maldorotha, then you're definitely going to have it there ready to go. Just in case no one's really... just in case there's new people who don't know, it's called Mike and Trike combo, which is, Mikaeus the Unhallowed and Triskelion.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain, just like do a rundown of the cards for us real quick?
Yeah, so I've never actually done the combo myself. I cards that are involved. So Mikaeus...
Only one person I know has played the combo on us, and that was our friend Sean, who plays it in his Gave deck.
I'm not the biggest fan of the combo. I will preface it just by saying that, but it works with... So you need Mikaeus the Unhallowed. Either... If you want to do it with 2 cards, you need Mikaeus the Unhallowed and Triskelion in play. Mikaeus the Unhallowed is a 6 mana, so 3 and 3 black. I think he's a 5/5. And
yes, he's a 5/5.
He gives your other non-human creatures +1/+1 and Undying, I believe is the text.
Correct.
Okay. Triskelion is a 6 mana artifact creature. He enters the battlefield with, I think, 3 +1/+1 counters.
Yep. He also has starting power and toughness as 1/1.
So with both of those on the field, what you would do is, with Triskelion, you would remove... Triskelion has an activated ability that says remove a +1/+1 counter from him, or from Triskelion, and deal 1 damage to any target. I think the original card says to target creature or player, but it's been eroded to any target.
Yeah, it says remove a +1/+1 counter from Triskelion. Triskelion deals 1 damage to target creature or player.
Right, and that's been eroded to any target, so you can hit Planeswalkers if you want, but you're probably killing people at this point, so you don't care.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You remove 2 of the +1/+1 counters. Remember, he starts at 3. To deal 2 damage, spread however you choose, and then you need to use the last counter to deal damage to Triskelion itself, because remember, it is not a human, which means it will have +1/+1 from Mikaeus. So once you remove that +1/+1 counter and deal damage to Triskelion, it will die. Since it was a non-human, it has Undying, and since it had 0 +1/+1 counters on it when it died, it will come back to play with an additional +1/+1 counter on it, in addition to the 3 that it enters with, so it'll come back with 4. You repeat this process over and over again, killing Triskelion each time, and each time it dies, because you're removing the +1/+1 counter to do it, it will keep dying without a +1/+1 counter on it. And I didn't actually discuss this, but the importance of it not having +1/+1 counters on it is because Undying will not proc on death if it has a +1/+1 counter on it already. And I think that pretty much explains the full combo, unless I missed something.
Yep. I mean, it's one of the easier combos to get, like, to understand, like, the mic and trike. But with saying that, I think we've talked Yumori a bit now. We still have a lot more to get through. If you have anything else to say.
Yeah, I just want to specify. I just realized I said scavenging ooze. I meant necrotic ooze.
Okay.
Two different.
Necrotic ooze lets you have activated abilities out of the graveyard on Necrotic ooze.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the next one we're going to talk about is the Dimir companion. It is Garuda, Doom of Depths. It is 4 and hybrid Dimir for a 6/6 legendary creature, Demon Kraken. With Companion, your starting deck contains only cards with even converted mana cost. When Garuda enters the battlefield, each player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard. Put a creature card with an even converted mana cost from among those cards into the battlefield under your control.
Okay. So, this one is one that James can attest. I've been experiencing pushback on from our play group. They insist it's not that good. I insist that it is absolutely nutso. It's a free reanimate effect on a 6/6. Before I discuss its ramifications and its possibilities, I do want to mention that obviously when he enters the battlefield, each player mills 4, but the last line of text, that ability is mandatory, which means if you can reanimate a creature, you must do so. If there is a legal target, you have to reanimate that target. It does not say you may put a creature card. It says put a creature card with an even converted mana cost from the milled cards onto the battlefield. So even if it's detrimental to you, you must do it. Now, obviously, if there is more than one target, you can choose which one you target. But you must do it no matter what. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the only drawback I have with it, and I'll just play devil's advocate right now for everyone else who's going, but converted mana cost. I mean, there are a lot of great cards with even converted mana costs.
Yes.
But I mean, that's one thing that you have to worry about with your deck building is how do you effectively build a deck that uses this card, that uses Garuda to its max potential while still only using even converted mana costs. Now, like, there's things like Growth Spiral, Paradise Druid, I mean, Spark Double. So, I mean, there's ways of doing it.
Most clones are even costed clones. Let's see. There is... I hate to bring this up, but I just mentioned Necrotic Ooze. He's 4 mana. Triskelion is 6. Micaias is 6.
And I mean, they're in the right colors. I mean, if you could do... I mean, Mike and Trike kind of just... So it's like Sanguine Blood, the Sanguine Blood combo in black. I mean, if you in the colors and if you want to play that route, you totally can. I mean, just... If you want to be that person and run the Mike and Trike, then go ahead and do it. I mean, right. I wouldn't say no.
But barring that, there are several...
There's a lot of other things you can do.
The Grave Titan, one of the best black cards ever, is 6 mana. All the Titans are 6 mana, so you could even play Frost Titan in here. Like I said, all the clones are... Not all of them, but I think most of them are evenly costed. It's also important to note that 0 is an even mana cost. I don't know how that's relevant, but if you wanted to play Midnight in your Garuda deck, you could go ahead and do that.
I mean, 0 being an even mana cost, you could play those 0 mana rocks.
Right, and there's a ton of 2 mana rocks out there. One of the common points that I've had brought up to me with Garuda being only even mana costs is that, you can't play your Soul Ring, and to that I say, who cares?
But Soul Ring, I mean,
and you're 99
Soul Ring's great, but I mean, you could always just play. I mean, Soul Ring's great, but it's an artifact, and artifacts are really easy to get removed from the game. Whereas if you played Growth Spiral, which is the same, it's 1 more, but you get to draw a card and put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. And I mean, removing lands from the game isn't something we really do in Commander because I mean, it's kind of frowned upon.
Another thing to note is that it is in blue-black. Muldrotha happens to be Sultai, and I didn't mention this earlier, I think, but companion cards, when they die, they go straight to the graveyard. So, you may want to bear that in mind for your Muldrotha decks out there. If you wanted to build a spicy little brew, make yourself.
And he's, I mean,
deck.
I mean, you could either go, you know, the even mana cost deck, or you could always go with the companion card we just talked about, Umori, and I mean, you could get both of them in the one Muldrotha deck.
Even mana costs, and they have to share a card type. Wow, you actually could. That's absolutely insane.
But one would be in the 99, and one would be your companion.
Well,
because you only have one companion card per deck.
Right, but for the one that is in the deck, you wouldn't have to satisfy its companion condition.
No, but I mean, either way, they're both really easy to satisfy in a, you know, in Sultai colors.
Right, and both very powerful in their own regards. I would consider Garuda maybe a little more powerful. Actually, I don't know. It's pretty close. I
think the effect on Garuda is, I mean, I would most likely play Garuda in the 99 and play Umori, because then you can get the reduction on Garuda, and then just just makes it even better. Instead of being a 6 CMC for a 6/6, it's a 5 CMC for a 6/6, so you're just getting extra value there, and then you get to bring something back as well. So I mean, you could mill yourself into a Grave Titan. Grave Titan comes out, adds, you know, he comes out, he's a 6/6, he puts 2/2/2 zombies on the field. I mean, for 5 mana, you've literally just put what? Quick math, 14 power on the field in one turn.
16 actually, because Grave Titan makes
look at that.
2/2/2s. Yeah.
I never said I was a math whiz ever.
Barring that, I mean, everybody, maybe, if you're not familiar with the Praetors, they're an old card type. Each of them are very powerful in their own regard. Muldrotha, I know we're talking about Muldrotha a lot, but I think this is probably the best home for that deck, or for this card. She is in green, blue, and black. 2 of the Praetors, the blue one, which is Jin-Gitaxias, and the green one, which is
Vorinclex.
Vorinclex is 8 mana, and Jin-Gitaxias is 10.
Again, even better mana cost?
Those are all even mana costs. You can watch your table's eyes roll as you slam a Garuda into a Vorinclex onto the battlefield, or Jin-Gitaxias. So I think it's just overall a very powerful card. I feel like a lot of people are really overlooking the potential of it in the Commander format, and I look forward to possibly trying to run this Muldrotha build myself, as I've been looking to revamp it actually.
I mean, let's we can do a spicy brew with it. I mean, we can sit down and hash it out. And we both can make the deck and see what's going on.
If the public is interested, we can put that list out there for anybody that wants to also take part.
We can put it up on Archidect, or we can put it up on anywhere else that hosts decks, and we can put it in the we'll put it in the show notes.
For anybody else that's also interested, remember that your Dryad Arbor in your Muldrotha deck is 0 mana cost creature, which means that Garuda can get it. If you cared enough to do it.
So I think we'll move on from the Muldrotha, Umari, and Garuda deck.
Yes.
Because that is just ridiculously powerful. I mean, we just brewed up a deck on the spot. And we'll put that list together later on today, and we'll put it in the show notes, so people can have a look at it and kind of look and see what we were talking about.
And also, whenever this podcast picks up and people start participating, you let us know what kind of budget you want us to work with when we do these builds.
Yeah, definitely.
That's important, because not everybody has the same disposable income. I happen to have, you know, a collection where I can build these things pretty, you know, easily. But I understand that not everybody will have access to that, so you let us know what kind of budget you want us to work with. If you want us to use guild gates instead of shocklands, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to sit with a budget. I mean, I don't have a massive collection of cards per se, but I mean, I've been able to build. I mean, I mainly just work off trades, just picking up, like, I mean, those mystery boosters that just came out give you a lot. I mean, can give you a lot of trade fodder to get the cards that you actually want. I mean, that's pretty much what I did, and I was able to build a decent Taser deck for about, you know, $25. No, it was actually $22, and the rest were all trades. And I mean, I traded for good cards too. Like, I traded for like Karmic Guides and
a Big Mac
and Revelark. I mean, it depends on who's wanting to trade for what, but I mean, trade food for cards, and I'm happy with that. So moving on, we've got Obosh the Prey Piercer. He is the Rakdos Companion. He is 3 hybrid Rakdos for a 3/5 legendary Helion Horror. That was really hard to get out. Helion Horror. Companion. Your starting deck contains only cards with odd converted mana costs and land cards. If a source you control with an odd converted mana cost would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. So my first thoughts reading this deck would be X spells, just playing huge odd X spells. Because I mean, technically, could you play X spells? I didn't even think of that. Because they wouldn't be
cards. I mean, Villainous Wealth isn't a great example.
It's not even in the colors.
As long as the converted mana cost minus the X is odd, it's completely fine. So like Fireball, for example, is red and X. That has a converted mana cost of 1. So that would work. So if you Fireballed for 10, you're Fireballing for 20. If you Fireballed for 20, you're Fireballing for 40, etc.
Yeah, as long as it contains odd converted mana cost, so...
Right, so Exsanguinate would not work. Exsanguinate would not work for more reasons than one. Exsanguinate is each opponent loses X life, I think, is the way it's worded.
Yes.
Yes, and that is not damage dealt. I don't think that actually works. I might actually be wrong on that. I'm not entirely sure. Moving on, though, it's not going to work because it's even mana cost. Just want to clarify, because some people might be confused as to why Obosh specifies your starting deck can only have odd converted mana costs and lands, whereas Garuda says just even converted mana costs, because lands are 0 mana cost permanents. So if it didn't have that text right there and land cards, you would not be able to play lands in your deck, because they are evenly costed, because they are 0 mana. Just wanted to specify that for anybody that, saw that and was going to ask in advance.
Be a little confused at Obosh. Just the wording saying end lands, because, yeah.
So in Rakdos, obviously you have a ton of effects that deal damage, a ton of spells. There's Earthquake, there's... do you remember the name of that red one from Conspiracy 2? I can't remember the name of it.
No, but I can remember Comet Storm.
Comet Storm is even, isn't it? Is Comet Storm...
I'm just quickly bringing it up now.
Yes, I am too. I think it's 2 red, right? Yeah, so Comet Storm is...
Yeah, 2 red.
So you wouldn't be able to play that one, unfortunately.
And you wouldn't be able to play Exsanguinate either, because it's double black, but it says each opponent loses X life, you gain life equal to the life lost this way.
Right.
Which I need to pick one up.
So, all your actual Rakdos commanders, and by that I mean Rakdos, the demon, the legend, the actual demon from Ravnica.
Yeah,
I believe all of his iterations are even mana costs, except maybe his original one, Rakdos the Defiler. Nope, it's also 6. Okay. So
they're all even, yeah.
So I mean, the demon boy.
No, so this card it requires a bit of a workaround to get it to work. I don't think it's one of the more powerful companions we have. But I mean, if you were looking at doing that odd, I mean, there is a lot of X spells that you could use.
And not to mention that X spells aren't necessarily the only way to build it. You could just build some kind of, multicolored. Doesn't even have to be just Rakdos. It could be 5 color. And you just build only odd mana costs and anything. Notice it says a source you control with an odd converted mana cost. Anything that has an odd mana cost will deal double damage. All the time. So, Hidetsugu the Heartless, actually, I just realized. Hidetsugu the Heartless is a 5 mana 3/3, I believe. You can tap to deal damage to each player equal to half of their starting life total rounded up. Or, sorry, not starting life total, just their life total. Which means that with Obosh on the field, you would kill the whole table by tapping it. because it's dealing half of the life total rounded up, and you double that. So it will kill the whole table every time.
Is this just how we... this has just become how do we kill the table as fast as possible with these companions?
Well, the problem is that it'll kill you too, because it deals damage to each player. So
yeah, but if you just want the if you just want the game to come out as a draw, then why not?
Now there is one way around that, and is by giving Hidetsugu lifelink, because you will gain the life that he deals in damage. So that would be a decent combo-ish win. I really can't think of many homes for this card outside of just mana cost Bruise. I feel like the red Spellslinger route could potentially work, but I feel like it'll get hated out a lot of the time just because, people don't really like when you Earthquake for 20.
No, I don't like when you Earthquake for 20 either, but
yeah,
I mean...
it
is what I mean. Like, games have to end eventually, and I mean, if you want to end the game that way, then totally go for it.
So I do think this one does have some potential, and I think maybe I'm just struggling to find the home for it, and it probably has a lot to do with the fact that I don't play this color combination often. I think the Hidetsugu combo I just mentioned might be a pretty spicy way to do it, and people are probably going to laugh every time. I know I personally would laugh, because Hidetsugu is a really funny card.
But then that just comes down to it's being played as like it's more of like a Genki combo, really. Because it kills you at the same time. Unless you had like...
Restless Collar or something to that effect.
Yeah, something to give it lifelink, that way you wouldn't die. But I mean, even if you all died, then the game ends, and you just shuffle up and play another one.
Worth noting that if you play Phyrexian Arena with Obosh out, it deals 2 damage to you instead of 1. That's a bit of a non-though. It does specify a permanent or player, not an opponent. So your Phyrexian Arena will deal 2 to you. Just a funny little interaction I wanted to note. And I really don't have much else to say about Obosh. I feel like he might be a little bit of a sleeper potentially, but I don't really have much to say about him.
I think with this one we're probably still waiting for cards to get printed for it, but I mean it's probably the start of a line that Wizards are doing to make this card better. Okay, so moving on, the next one we have it's basically the poster child for the Companion. It was everywhere when Companion. It was the first Companion ever came out and during the spoiler seasons. Is Garuda the Macro Sage. He is in Simic colors, so he is 3 hybrid Simic for a 4/5 legendary Dinosaur Hippo. Dinosaur Hippo. Just let that sink in for a second. Dinosaur Hippo. I mean, I love it. Companion.
And the art looks more like a walrus. It's very interesting.
It does. It really does. Okay, so Companion. Your starting deck contains only cards with converted mana cost 3 or greater and lands. Now, that and land sync comes back because, again, lands are, counted as 1 CMC.
0.
0 CMC, sorry, which is equal. My bad. It's been a long day. It also says when Garuda the Macro Sage enters the battlefield, draw a card for each other permanent you control with converted mana cost 3 or greater. He is a huge draw engine for you.
Yeah, so this card reminds me a lot of Regal Force, which is a 7 mana, 5/5 creature. It's 4 and then green. Which I'm actually going to revisit that on the next card that we talk about. Please remind me. It'll be a good example to use.
Yep.
And Regal Force says when it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each green creature you control. Garuda is essentially the same thing, except instead of just green creatures, it's for any permanent you control with converted mana cost 3 or greater. Now, what makes this effect particularly powerful is the fact that, again, it has Companion. You are guaranteed to have this effect on turn 5 every time, provided you have the lands to cast it. And he does not draw a card for himself, unfortunately. Regal Force does count himself, but Garuda does not count itself. It says each other permanent you control, but it does count all permanents. So creatures, artifacts, enchantments. No lands have mana cost 3 or greater. Am I missing any? Planeswalkers. any permanent, anything that sticks to the battlefield, if it's got a mana cost of 3 or greater, you draw a card.
You're drawing a card for it, and we always say the most powerful thing to do in Commander is draw a card.
I think he's decent. The drawback is really not that bad. In Commander, your turns often start off casting, or your game starts off casting, 3, 4, 5 drops anyway. Not a lot of people play aggro where you're playing 2 drops consistently.
Yeah, and usually the first 3 turns of a Commander game is land, go, land, go, land, go. That's the usual way. But sometimes it is like, land, Soul Ring, into something else, like into a Signet. But I mean, even then, like, you couldn't do that with this deck because you have to play from 3 upwards. But that's not going to give you that much of a drawback when you can play those bigger spells at the end. If you were really worried about mana in those colors, I mean, you've got all of your rampy cards. So you've got all of your ramp creatures.
Cultivate, Kodama's Reach. You can play Explosive Vegetation.
Wood Elves.
Circuitous Route. Wood Elves.
I mean, even if you wanted to, you could play a Nissa's Renewal. I mean, it's 6 CMC, but gets you 3 lands and gains you 7 life. I mean, it's not really a card we ever see in Commander, but I mean, it's another way of getting, with this deck, more lands into play so you can play those bigger spells.
For those of you who've been paying attention to my constant praise of Muldrotha, this card happens to be Simic.
I think I just found the episode title. We love Muldrotha.
Joking aside, there are a lot of homes for this card. It's one of the most vanilla companions, but because of that, it is also one of the more powerful ones. It just has a very powerful effect, and it's something that every deck, if it can play it, would want.
It's very Simic. I will say that it's very much what Simic wants to do. Simic wants to put lots of cards in your hands, and I mean that isn't a bad thing. I mean, it's exactly what we need in Simic. It's what you would expect out of a Simic companion.
I don't really have anything else to say about it. Like I said, it's as far as companions go, it's a very vanilla minion. So there's not too much I want to say about that unless you had anything to add, James.
Okay.
All right.
So then moving on, we actually have an odd one, because for everyone else in every other format, it would be known as a Gruul companion, but in this instance, in Commander, it's actually a 5-color companion. So it is Gigantha the Wellspring. He is 4 and hybrid Gruul for a 5/5 legendary elemental elk. With Companion, no card in your starting deck has more than one of the same mana symbol in its mana cost. You can then tap him to add Wooburg. This mana can't be spent to pay generic mana costs.
So I just noticed something, actually, that I'm actually probably going to tweet Sheldon Enery about to ask. These cards don't technically start in your deck, so I'm not entirely sure if their color identities matter. Has there been a confirmation on that? Do you know?
Not that I've seen, no. And I don't think anyone's actually asked that question. But I would assume, because it comes... I mean...
I know.
Everything, yeah, I mean, even for us, I mean, and I'm not saying that we know every single rule of Commander, because there is always a couple, like the one would just come up, but I would assume that if it's a part of your cohesive deck, then it would have to follow the guidelines of color identity, because the other ones can only be played in those colors.
Right, and
because then any companion could be played in any color deck.
Right, which would be the dilemma. Which I feel like even if that was allowed, people probably would house rule it that it would have to match the color identity. So
I believe that
we're gonna go on that premise and say that
this is a 5-color commander.
Is a 5-color identity.
Yeah.
So as James said, it can tap to add Wooburg, which is white, blue, black, red, and green mana. That is one of the highest mana payoffs for a mana dork that you can get. Only seen from the likes of things like Bloom Tender and Fabro Elder is the newest one that is similar. But this one guarantees Wooburg every time. Now, the drawback, obviously, is that you can't spend that mana to pay generic mana costs. Generic mana costs are, when you look at the mana cost for a card, you'll see a gray circle with a number inside of it. That means that mana is generic, and it can be paid by any color of mana. The mana that Jegantha produces cannot be used to pay that cost. It can only be spent on the colored pips on the top right in the mana cost. So to talk about,
but even so, that is really powerful on its own. I mean, tapping to add 5 mana to your mana pool,
right? And in a 5 color,
and I mean,
you'll almost always have use for each of those pips.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you could use this. I mean, this in a Golos deck.
Oh yeah, that
because you then have all of your
right
that exactly. I mean, Golos is 2 and Wooburg, and you get to look at the top 3 cards of your library and
exile
put the
and you get
exile
for free.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, especially it's 5 colors. There is definitely ways to tap and untap legendary permanents. So, I mean, you could almost add infinite colored mana to your mana pool with this.
So this and then infinite of everything except blue alone with Freed from the Real. So that's a 2-card combo right there to make infinite of any color mana except blue.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a combo for anybody.
You could do Isochron Scepter and Dramatic Reversal.
That would not work because Isochron Scepter is 2 generic mana and tap to use it. So you would need mana rocks with it, but it could work.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work with Jegantha alone. But if you had a couple mana rocks, then yeah. Even if you had just a Soul Ring, there you go. Infinite colored mana. So his companion restriction is that your starting deck cannot contain more than... No cards in your starting deck can have more than one of the same mana symbol in its mana cost. The wording can be a little tricky to wrap your head around, but I just mentioned before Regal Force was 4 generic mana and 3 green. Notice that the green repeats. You cannot have any of that in your deck. You can only have 1 pip of each color on a card. So for anybody who is in Standard, maybe just getting into Commander, there are a few cards that have been introduced lately that see Standard play that best exemplify this. Nissa World Shaker, is that her name? The newer one? World Shaker?
Sure that's it. Nissa Who Shakes the World.
There you go. I was close enough. Nissa Who Shakes the World, her mana cost is 3 generic mana and 2 green. The green repeats, therefore you cannot use her in the deck with Jegantha. Brazen Borrower also sees a lot of Standard play. That is 1 generic mana and 2 blue. You'll notice that the blue repeats. Again, that's a no-go. You can't have
and then
repeat.
And then it looks even worse with Casualties of War because that's double black, double green.
Right. So
and that used to see Standard play.
I don't think that one sees as much Standard play. It might see a little bit of sideboard play. But Niv Mizzet Reborn was a deck for a little while. I don't actually know if it's still played. But Niv Mizzet Reborn is Wooburg, exactly. It's white, blue, black, red, green. And you get I believe it's a 6/6. And he also does some stuff with getting guild-colored cards off the top of your deck. Look at the top 10. He is Wooburg, which means that a Jegantha can tap to pay for it. And since none of the mana costs repeat, you can very easily play Niv Mizzet in this Jegantha deck. Jegantha might even be the companion in your Niv Mizzet deck. But the point I
definitely believe that, yeah.
The point I wanted to make is that the mana cost cannot repeat. As long as you only have 1 of each pip in a card, you're fine.
Yeah. And I mean, that's super easy to do in a Commander deck.
There's so many directions to take Jegantha that I feel like trying to discuss all of them would probably do it more of a disservice, because then people might get a little too tunnel visioned. We did mention Golos, that's a very good one. any 5-color general, like Ramos is another good one. I mean, those are probably the two of the top tier ones. Then you also have Child of Alara.
You can play Joda.
Joda's another very good one. Joda means that Gigantha can pay for any of your spells, because you can pay Uber for any of them.
Yep.
So that's another very good one. Again, there's just so many different directions with 5 colors. You can do literally anything you want. So I don't want to get too into the nitty gritty of it. Otherwise, it can be a very long conversation. Unless you had anything to add, James.
No, I have nothing else to add. No.
Okay. So we're gonna move on to the next one.
So the next card we're going to talk about is Ikoria.
Close enough.
I mean, these names are just so ridiculous.
The Orphan.
Kahira, the Orphan Guard. Kahira, the Orphan Guard is a 1 hybrid Selesnya for a 3/2 legendary cat beast. With Companion, each creature card in your starting deck is a cat, elemental, nightmare, dinosaur, or beast card. He also has Vigilance. Each other creature you control that's a cat, elemental, nightmare, dinosaur, or beast gets a +1/+1 and has Vigilance. Now, not my biggest thing, but I mean the first thing that comes to mind when I see this card is Gishath, tribal dinosaurs. But you can only have dinosaurs. Now, in a Gishath deck, you want to run the human shamans, like Kinjani's Koala, I believe it's called, and it reduces the cost of your dinosaurs. But I mean, giving them a +1/+1 and vigilance, I mean, it's pretty big. You could also play this in pretty much like Zukama, Gishath, any Selesnya, or any dinosaur deck that has Selesnya in the color identity.
You could also play this in your Arabo Roar of the World cat tribal deck.
You could, yes. I was looking at, like, the first thing that popped into my head was dinosaurs. Because, I mean, I recently just built a tribal dinosaur deck for the misses.
I think the most important inclusion on this card is Nightmare. And not by important, I don't mean, like, you know, of high relevance. I just think it's very interesting that they included Nightmare on a Selesnya card. Because as far as I know, there aren't a whole ton of those in green-white. Dinosaur, Beast, Cats, and Elementals obviously are.
Let me just jump into Gatherer real quick, and I can tell you how many horrors there are if you want to keep talking.
Nightmares, not horrors. So this card is basically a creature version of Always Watching. For anybody that was playing in Shadows over Innistrad during when that was in Standard. Always Watching is an enchantment, 1 white. Creatures, non-token creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Vigilance. So this is essentially the same thing, but it doesn't specify non-token, but it does specify that it has to be a cat, elemental, nightmare, dinosaur, or beast. Like I said, cat, dinosaur, and beast and Selesnya are probably going to be your most prevalent creature types. Elemental is also somewhat prevalent. Nightmare, like I said, I'm pretty sure that Selesnya doesn't have many, if any of those. I'm not entirely sure. One of the best elementals ever printed is Voice of Resurgence. That was printed in Dragon's Maze. That's a Selesnya elemental, green-white, 2/2. Whenever it dies or an opponent casts a spell during your turn, you get a star token, and its power and toughness equal the number of creatures you control. That would be an auto-include. Honestly, I think the best way to build this is not to narrow in on any one particular tribe. I think you just smash all of these types together. You play Kahira either as your companion or even as your commander. And you just have a very go-wide, varying creature type strategy.
Okay.
There are a lot of cards that have been printed recently that encourage you to have several different creature types, and I think this card is a great way to really capitalize on those benefits.
Now, there is only one card in the history of Magic that has Selesnya and is a horror. That is Atraxa, Praetor's Voice. And we all know Atraxa, you know, it's the 4-color commander, everything but red. Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, Lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step, you proliferate for a 4/4. It's an Angel Horror, but I don't see the relevance of running this in an Atraxa deck. I mean, you can run Atraxa in the deck if you wanted to, or part of the deck.
I mean, if you ran Atraxa as the commander...
But it already gives it... I mean, realistically, all you're going to get out of it is a +1/+1. And in white, there's better ways to get +1/+1 counters on Atraxa. I mean, you can play Cathard's Crusade. That's an even better way of getting more than one counter on it.
But don't forget, here is the companion. This isn't in your deck.
True.
This is just an extra little buff.
So, I mean, if you were to get a track out and then... I mean, too bad they're not +1/+1 counters. It's just a +1/+1, because that way you can then... You can't proliferate them.
Right. It's literally just another anthem that it doesn't... And this has a lot of testament to the power level of Companion. It literally has no synergy with Atraxa at all. It's literally just an anthem that gives vigilance and +1/+1.
Yeah.
But I would still 100% play this. Because it's very easy to build a deck with all these creature types, because Atraxa is just such a powerful card, and Kahira just emphasizes that power even further.
And I mean, but it kind of gets Atraxa away from being that commander that's only played as, played as a Super Friends deck. Because, I mean, I've seen a couple of Atraxa decks, but a lot of them are just... Atraxa Super Friends, because you can proliferate those counters, and it's a lot of proliferating. Or, you play Atraxa with Simic Ascendancy and get to that 20 really, really quickly. So I mean, like, it kind of breaks that meta mold that Atraxa has around her as being the Super Friends commander.
Right, and I guarantee you that people are going to look at you with much brighter eyes when you break out Atraxa and say, by the way, I have Kahira as my companion. Yeah,
I mean, if someone goes, because, it's happened to us a couple times when someone's pulled out, a commander and gone, hang on a second, it's not that command, it's not that Muldrotha deck, or it's not that Urza deck, we have an Urza deck in our playgroup, and it legitimately isn't that Urza deck, it's very janky, and it does what it needs to do, but it doesn't do it the way that everyone else does with the high-powered artifacts. Now, if someone was to pull out an Atraxa deck and be like, hang on, it's not that Atraxa deck that everyone sees, and then pull out Kahira as their companion, I'll be like, okay, let's see what kind of flavor we can have here. Let's see what kind of, spicy brew that they've brought up with this. And I'd be more interested to play against that person with that deck than if they were just to play Super Friends Atraxa that you see everywhere.
And I guarantee you that people are going to severely underestimate just how much power this card will accrue over time, because of how unimpressive it looks on the surface.
I mean, you could be playing... it just says each creature card in your starting deck. You could play this as a lands deck and play Rampaging Baloths, because he's a beast and he makes beasts.
That is 100% true.
So I mean, you could play a lands deck, like a landfall land matters deck, because there is a lot of beasts and that have landfall triggers. That's one thing that I would like to see with this.
Okay, so I have bad news. The deck that we've been talking about, Atraxa, I decided to just look it up because you had said horror, but Kahira specifies nightmare, not horror.
Oh, shit.
The deck that we were just talking about is unfortunately not feasible.
Oh, wow. That's my bad. I put horror instead of nightmare into the text box.
Worth noting, though.
Here I am spreading misinformation.
As a quick backup to that strategy, though, you will note that the previous companion we talked about, Gigantha, is an elemental. Is also 5 colors. So you could essentially carry on the deck with him instead. A mana dork of sorts.
Yeah, I guess take everything that we just said about Atraxa and apply it to the last companion card that we just talked about. Okay, this time I'm doing a search for... yeah, my bad. This time I'm doing a search for Nightmare.
So
Okay, so there is only 3.
okay.
And they all come from Ikoria or C20. Which we will talk about those cards in the upcoming episode, next episode, when we talk about the legendary creatures coming in Ikoria and the C20 commanders.
Okay, so I don't really have
But there is
to say about Kahira.
But there is a little synergy there with the set. They obviously built it as a limited format, and realized that if they were going to put how that specifically calls out nightmares on Selesnya, then they better have some cards that are Selesnya nightmares.
So I don't really have anything else to say about it. Kahira is probably one of the less impressive cards, but I think it still has its uses.
I mean, you could play it in, if you wanted to give up a slot, you could play it in your Omnath deck, but I would just play an Elemental in there instead of giving your Elemental a +1/+1.
But Omnath is... I'm assuming you're talking about Locus of Rage.
Yes. He's the Teamer colors.
Oh, you're talking about the Elemental one.
Yeah.
I guess they're all Elementals, but the newest one.
Yeah. the one from M20. Or M19, sorry.
The problem, though, is that Kahira is Selesnya, color identity. And he is...
Man, I am just missing on everything today, aren't I? What did I think Omnath was?
If you did want to build that Elemental deck, though, Horde of Notions is a very good 5-color Elemental.
So, aside, I think Kahira and Horde of Notions is probably the best bet you're going to get, besides playing it in, a dinosaur tribal deck or a cat elemental deck. But I think we've talked about Kahira enough, so let's move on here to the next one, and it is the second to last one that we have, and it is the Boros Companion. It is Zerda, the Dawnwaker. He is a 1 hybrid Boros for a 3/3 legendary elemental fox companion. Each permanent card in your starting deck has an activated ability. Abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1. It also has an activated ability of 1 tap. Target creature can't block this turn.
So, this is an interesting ability in Boros colors. It's not one that we haven't seen before. We just usually see this effect in things like blue or Simic. I forgot.
But I think we need this outside of those colors as well.
Do you remember the name of the Simic card? It was a creature that reduced activated abilities.
Not off the top of my head.
From Guilds of Ravnica? Biomancer or something, I think. Biomancer's Familiar. That's the one. Biomancer's Familiar and Training Grounds. Biomancer's Familiar Simic Training Grounds is blue. Both do the same thing as Zerda. Reduce activated abilities by 2 generic mana. They also have the same text where it can't cost less than 1. There's also...
Because you can't have activated abilities as 0, because that'd be way too strong. But they also have activated abilities on them too.
There's also an older card called Hearthstone, not Hearthstone. Okay, we're still talking about Magic. Hearthstone, sorry, that's better. Which reduces all activated abilities by 1, not just yours. So, until now, Hearthstone was, as far as I know, one of the only ways you could get this effect in these colors. And now that we have Zerda, which is pretty much an already tutored for version of Hearthstone,
and it's better too.
It's a pretty unique effect, and you can really abuse some abilities with this. So Eldrazi Displacer suddenly becomes 1 colorless mana, blink a creature, comes back tapped.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest one that is going to really show you the power of this commander is playing like a blink affected deck.
A very popular combo in blue was, I believe the card is Power Artifact. It's a very older, much older card with Basalt Monolith or like Grim Monolith, and
Basalt Monolith and Grim Monolith are very easy, infinite combos.
Right. So previously that combo was pretty much unique to blue, and now with Zerta, that is, but it is possible in Boros, and not only is it possible in Boros, but it is possible consistently in Boros, because again, you have your companion. So that's actually quite a frightening interaction.
Now, if you were to look...
I would definitely be scared to see this companion show up at my table.
I could see that as well. Now, if we wanted to mash a couple of these together, you could have Zerta with Gigantha and play Golos, because then your Gigantha is basically just paying for your Golos.
Yes, exactly.
Or if you were to play the 5-colored Kenrith deck, it would make the Kenrith deck so much better. So I think that's one way that we're going to see this coming out. I mean, is people playing... I mean, we have a group hug Kenrith deck in our play group, and it doesn't... The hugs just get stronger and stronger, really. Specifically with that deck, because, he plays the hug cards and then starts playing the squeeze cards, and having the ability to then... that knocks the red, green, and white activated ability down to just their pips, and then reduces the blue and the black ones down as well. So, I mean...
Worth noting that Zerta does say each permanent in your starting deck has an activated ability, which means that you would not be able to play Heartstone in the same deck, because it does not have an activated ability. But it also means that your non-permanents are not restricted in any way. You can do whatever you want with those. And that is an important distinction to make, so that you're not trying to cram every single card that has an activated ability into your deck. You still have room for utility cards. That being said, though, the only thing I really want to leave off with on this card is be cautious of this one if you see it pop up at the table.
Because not really. I mean, like, if you see it pop up on the table, I mean, it's gonna be fun to play against. I mean, that's really all we really want, is just have fun games of Commander, and not really hold the board down in stacks pieces and all that. So I mean, like, there's many ways you can build this deck or have this in other decks, and I think that's what they're trying to do with these companions, is just really shake up the way that we build our Commander decks. So, moving on from that one, our last one is the Ozov Companion, and I'm really excited for this one. I reckon this one could be a lot of fun. It's Luros of the Dream Den. It is one hybrid Ozov, 3/2 legendary Cat Nightmare. With Companion, each permanent card in your starting deck has converted mana cost 2 or less. Lifelink, and during each of your turns, you may cast one permanent spell with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard.
So, me and James were actually discussing this card a lot before we started recording here.
We did. It was almost like a pre-show kind of thing. We were very much like talking about it, and then I was like, hang on a second, stop. Let's record and get to that point and start talking about it again.
Loris is a very unique card in Commander in that restriction is nigh impossible to fulfill while still having a decently running deck. Having all your permanents be 2 or less is, in our format, extremely detrimental to you. Granted, there are some powerful cards that will fall within that mana cost, but a lot of them are non-permanents. And if you're going to have your deck just full of a bunch of, like, Isamaru, Hound of Kondas, then I don't think it's going to be amazing or a great experience. Worth noting that Umezawa's Jitte is 2 mana, and there's a lot of tutors in white for artifacts and enchantments. So if your deck can fire off that way with Loris, you'll probably do okay. But I think even in that scenario, it's a little underwhelming. So what we were discussing before we started recording is that this card is an amazing utility card for already existing reanimating decks. So I think in Commander, at least, the companion text on this card just doesn't exist. Just read this as a 3-mana Ozov 3/2 with lifelink, and during each of your turns, you can cast a permanent with CMC 2 or less from your graveyard.
That is just phenomenal.
I know for sure I would put this in my Alesha deck in a heartbeat. Even though I can't get it back with Alesha's ability, it's still an amazing, basically, backup commander. It can get Altar of Dementia for anybody that happens to run that as a sack outlet / graveyard filler. It's just a really good backup commander for any deck to react to things.
If anyone gets rid of your rocks, you can get your rocks back, so you can get your Sol Ring back, you can get your Arcane Signet back, you can get you can get your Locket, No, you can't get Locket. Sorry, Locket's 3 mana. You can get your Ozov Signet back.
You can get Mind Stone back. Mind Stone is a 2-mana artifact that you can pay 1 and tap and sack it to draw a card. It also taps for a mana. That'd be a good one. It's I just had one on. Oh, you can get your eggs back. Eggs is a term in Magic to refer to any artifact, any cheap artifact that says tap and sack or just sack. It sometimes it does something, and then it cycles itself, so it draws a card.
Yeah. But another
popular one.
Yeah. Another one that I was just thinking of is Ica Wellspring to draw a card, because it's not really in black and white. There's limited ways of drawing cards, and you have an artifact. It's 2 mana. When it enters the battlefield, it draws a card. When it leaves the battlefield, it draws a card. So if you have a way to be able to pull this off the battlefield consistently, then you'd have a decent draw engine, or just pulling out value.
The old spell bombs work very well with this.
Panic Spell Bomb.
Nihil Spell Bomb is the black one. I don't remember the white one. Executioner's Capsule, also very good in this deck. The recently printed Omens from Theros. The new Theros set, also very good with Loris. And I think just overall he's like I said, that companion text is just gone in our format. I would love for somebody to prove me wrong, but I think that's going to be the case. And honestly, even as that, he's extremely powerful. I think if we could functionally make the companion text on him work, he would be probably the best companion, if not one of the best companions for Commander. And I believe I don't really have anything else to say about Loris.
No, I'm just trying to find the white spell bomb, because I realized I said Panic Spell Bomb, and that's red.
That's the red one. there's Aether, Nihil, Panic,
Pyrite.
Well, that's the second red one, because they had printed.
Dang. I'm just all over the. I've just been like, should I even be in a Magic podcast if I can't even tell you the cards that you should be running?
Necrogen Spell Bomb is the second blue one, black one. Origin Spell Bomb, that's one of the white ones. That's the one I was trying to come up with. And Sunbeam Spell Bomb. Those are the 2 white ones. I would probably run all 4 if I was building Loris as the commander, if I'm being honest. But again, like I said, I don't really have anything else to say about Loris. Just a really good card, high utility, high power, and I think a lot of people are going to underrate Loris until they actually see him on the field doing his thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of these companions have been underrated in just the way that people think about the way they build their decks and the way that they kind of, play Magic, because it is going to shake up our format as much as it's going to shake up any other format. And I've been seeing people who just have been saying that companions don't belong in Magic at all, and they don't belong in Commander, and I don't think that's true, because they're printed for a reason, and I mean, we've just given you many examples on how to run these as either in the 99 or as the commander or even as the companion. And I think that all of them have their own spot. Even if we're not, I mean, we're here to play fun Commander. I mean, Commander's a casual format. You know, we're not here to always play the strongest metas. If you want to play the strongest metas, then that's more of a CEDH thing. But I think from moving on, that's going to wrap up this episode of Commander at Arms.
I would, if anybody is listening to this, I'd love to hear your opinions. Like I said, I'd love to be proven wrong about Luris. I'd love to see his companion be fulfilled in a decently built deck that enjoys some success.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to leave off on our personal favorites of the companions. I think that would be cool. So I actually have a little bit of a tie. Okay, so I will say, of all of them, I like 4 of them more than the rest. And I think my favorite one is probably Garuda. And I know that's a real cop-out answer because he's seeing a crap ton of standard play right now. But I just think I sold myself on the Muldrotha build that I mentioned earlier, to be honest.
I think you've sold me on that Muldrotha build too. I mean, I was going to pick, my favorite one was going to be either one, Umori or Garuda. I wasn't quite sure, but I think I love them all a lot. Like, I think the Jegantha, the Wellspring build could be really fun. Like running it with Niv Mizzet or running it with Golos would be really fun. But yeah, I think I'm stuck back on that Umori the Collector and Garuda Doom of Depths, honestly. It's a toss-up between those two, because, I mean, I've been looking for a new Sultai deck to play and build. And I mean, I've got my Muldrotha ready to go. So, I mean, I think this is what I'm going to be looking into. So,
and
yeah, I think...
For what it's worth, my other 3 choices are Jegantha, the Luchary, or sorry, Luris, and
the band one,
and Yorion.
Yeah.
And I think that just about covers it.
Yeah, I think it really does. I mean, we'll get to talking about the legendary commanders that are coming out, and the legendary cards that are coming out or have come out. And that's pretty much our discussion on the companions. So, as we wrap up on this very first episode of Commander at Arms, I want to thank everyone for listening, subscribing, and rating us, following us on Facebook, Instagram, anywhere else we might be able to get some social medias out there. We're looking at doing a Patreon, so watch out for that content that's going to come up. If you have any questions or anything, you can email us. I will get the email out as of the next episode. And I think that pretty much wraps it up from me. Anything else you want to quickly say before we leave, Paul?
I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to our opinions. This is something that I personally have always dreamed of doing, and I'm glad that I have a friend that is like-minded that I can sit down and just hash these things out with. So I appreciate your time, and I hope you're all still playing during this confusing time with the pandemic going on.
We'll talk about that next time on how to play more Magic during a lockdown. All right, so that's us from here at Commander at Arms.
Have a lovely day.
Peace.